I looked over to my aunt and I saw her forehead up against the wheel of the car. I thought she was dead. 5 years ago, I almost lost my life and my leg. And I told myself that it would be time to tell my story when I could tell it without tears. So after 5 long years, I'm finally ready. Waiting has been the hardest part of this journey. Hit stop now if you're sensitive to mature subjects, because this story is raw, real, and unfiltered.
Episode 1, The Accident. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Johnita. Welcome to Waiting is the Hardest.
Are you ready, Johnita, to share your story?
I am. I'm ready. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and you asked if I was ready and how I was feeling, and I said, "Yep, I was ready." I'm a little more nervous today, but it's something that I feel like it's a story that needs to be told. So yes, I'm ready.
Why now?
People have been struggling a lot in the pandemic, right? And as people have been struggling, it may mentally, right, and emotionally, with the isolation and with, just everything, not seeing loved ones and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And as this pandemic has been going on, it made me think like, wow, this is something that I've been struggling with. These are things that I was struggling with through my ordeal. And so I knew that I wanted to tell the story, but I could never get through talking about it without crying. And so I told myself, that once I could tell the story without crying, I would, because I feel like that there is a lot of encouragement and hope and resources and just, information to share with folks to help them get through traumatic ordeals and situations. Mm-hmm. And so that's my why.
Okay. All right. And how did you document your journey?
So I started journaling my journey almost immediately. And it was a way to cope. I started journaling right away. And so yeah, I just started documenting everything, all of my feelings, how I was feeling in that moment. And I did it through the court for several years, actually, maybe 2 years. I documented and journaled my story.
Okay. So let's hear it.
All right. So I'm going to talk about the accident first. Okay. And this passage that I'm going to read is talking about what happened immediately when we were hit by the car. This car is going to hit us. These are the 9 words I heard before my life changed forever. 9 words that make a lifetime of difference. There are 171,476 words in the English language. But never would I ever believe that 9 little words would have such an impact on my life. When my aunt merged into the single file of the left lane and we slowed to a stop, she looked in the rearview mirror and saw a SUV coming down from the incline of the hill on the interstate and not stopping. When I heard her say the words, I leaned forward in my seat to look out my side view mirror. My legs were already taking up most of the room in the front. And when I moved up to look out the mirror and see what she was talking about, my foot and ankle were up against the doorwell. I heard her say, "2," and immediately felt impact, followed by a loud crack, like the crack of a bat after a grand slam. Next, our car started to roll. Everything felt like slow motion. I stayed conscious throughout it all. Our car rolled so much that I kept thinking, I wonder when we're going to stop rolling. It seemed like we rolled forever, when in fact it was 3 or 4 times. When we finally stopped, thankfully our car landed right side up. I immediately knew something was wrong with my ankle, but I was more concerned about my daughter and my aunt. From the back, I heard my daughter crying. I asked her if she was okay. I looked over to my aunt and I saw her forehead up against the wheel of the car. I thought she was dead. I looked down on the floor of the passenger side and saw the contents of my purse. Catching sight of my cell phone, I leaned over towards the left, towards my aunt, in order to grab the phone and passed it back to my daughter and asked her to call for help. I called my aunt's name over and over and over again, and at the same time tried to see what was going on with me. I couldn't tell exactly what had happened, but I knew it was bad, and I knew I was losing a lot of blood. I took my right leg and put it out the passenger side window. The window had broken during impact, but I knew that elevating my leg was more important than the cuts I would sustain on the back of my lower leg from the broken glass. I also knew I needed a tourniquet, so I took my seatbelt and tried wrapping it around my leg to stop the blood loss. The seatbelt wouldn't budge, and by this time, I looked around for help and saw a man with an orange construction vest in the median. I tried to yell for help, but he just stood and looked. He made no effort to approach the vehicle. I saw a lady in the distance on her cell phone. Eventually, I saw a man run around from the backside of our vehicle to assist us. When he got to me and saw my leg, he stopped dead in his tracks. The shock on his face said it all, but he quickly snapped out of it and tried to look encouraging and reassuring. I don't know who that guy was, but I always appreciated him for the feigned look of enthusiasm. He said he would get me some help. I asked him if he could help tie the seatbelt around my leg, but he couldn't get the belt to budge either, and he said the ambulance should be there soon. I asked if he could find something to put under my leg as a barrier from the glass and directed him to a wool poncho in the trunk. As this was going on, I heard my daughter in the background on the phone with my husband. They hit us, DP. That's what she calls my husband. They fucking hit us. Even though I couldn't see her, I heard the strength in her voice and felt reassured that she was going to be okay. Bringing my attention back to the activities in the front seat, there was a lady on the driver's side helping my aunt who had thankfully regained consciousness. "What happened? Where are we going?" she said. I explained to her what was going on and that help was on the way. She was disoriented and confused, and I kept talking to her to keep her oriented and to take my mind off of what was going on my side of the car. By this time, the ambulance arrives, and they come over and introduce themselves and tell me the plan to get my leg out of the window so the paramedics can transfer me to the waiting ambulance. This plan goes off without a hitch, and I'm rushed to the ambulance where they take stock of my situation. At this point, I'm not sure if I have a foot or not. And at this point, I'm also thinking that I'm on the I-77 interstate. As the paramedics are assessing me, they tell me they're just waiting for the helicopter to come get me. I knew instantly they were referring to a survival flight. I'm not sure what's happened to my aunt and daughter at this time, but I've heard their voices in the car, so I'm at peace. When the survival flight arrives, the paramedics tell me it's time to be transported. They take me out of the ambulance, and the survival flight crew begins to take over. When I exited the ambulance on the stretcher, I was amazed at how beautiful it was outside. Everything seemed extra bright and golden. Everything I saw and smelled seemed extraordinarily so. The trees looked breathtakingly green, and the air was the cleanest I've ever experienced. I was convinced I was about to die, and I was okay with it. But before I died, I had to find out what was going to happen to my family. I asked the flight crew member about my aunt. He pointed up to the sky and said, "See that chopper up there? They're waiting for us to load you in, and then they'll come down and get her." "Where are we going?" I asked. "We're flying you to the closest level 1 trauma center about an hour away." "And my daughter?" "Well, her injuries aren't life-sustaining, so she'll be transported to a local hospital to be assessed." I said point blank to that crew member, "Sir, If you want me to keep fighting, my 17-year-old daughter needs to come with me. You can't leave her at a hospital in an unknown state an hour from her mother. How will she get to me? Who will be with her? He looked at me for a second, and I like to think in that moment I stared him down and looked intimidating. But I imagine it's pretty hard to intimidate someone when you have a mangled appendage. He asked me how much my daughter weighed and said he would be right back. As he walked off, my daughter came over. She handed me the phone and said my oldest son wanted to talk to me. My first words to him were, "Son, I love you." I wasn't sure how much time I had left, and I needed to get the words out as soon as possible. At the same time, my son had just graduated from university and was living in Miami. He was preparing to attend the NBA G League tryouts in Las Vegas, and I wanted his mind to be clear. I told him I was being taken care of and that I was fine. His sister and aunt were fine, and to continue with his tryout plan.
How do you feel from reading that?
Strong.
Okay. How long after the accident did you write that initial passage?
It was a couple of weeks. It was a couple of weeks because I was in the hospital in Virginia for a week. And then once I got home to the hospital in my home state, I was there for a bit of time. So it was a couple of weeks when after the accident, when I wrote it.
And did you feel like you were going to die just based on the pain that you were in, the uncertainty, the magnitude of the impact? What made you feel like I might die in this moment?
It was just something in my gut. It was just something that said to me, like you are about to leave here. It was a feeling. And again, because everything was just, it was just there was no type of D to HD, 4D, 3D, there was no type of crispness to demonstrate like how crisp and how fresh and how it was. I've never experienced anything like that before or since. And it was just a feeling that I had that I was getting ready to leave here.
And I know you're a God-fearing woman. So do you feel like that was God's moment of trying to comfort you and prepare you for what was to come?
Oh yeah, when you're about to die, you're at peace. I wasn't afraid. I was completely at peace. I was completely at peace.
That's so interesting because, I've never been in that situation, but I think just knowing, it's interesting you hear you say at peace, because part of me feels like, man, I'd be trying to reconcile all the shoulda, coulda, needed to say, one more thing and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But it seems like you didn't have that at all.
No. I mean, like I said, I knew that I wanted to know what was going to happen to my family. Wanted to, let my son know that I loved him, but I was at peace. I was fine. I was fine. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid at all.
Going back to the people who first came on the scene, what happened to the person who actually hit you guys? Did he or she pull over? Were they one of the people that tried to get help? Where was that individual in all of this? Do you know?
I don't know.
So they possibly could have hit you and kept going?
Well, at that point, I didn't know what happened to that guy, right? So, yeah, I didn't know anything about him. At first, I thought that he was the guy standing in the median with the construction vest on. And then after I gotten more information, it was confirmed it wasn't him. So that must have been a worker, because they were doing construction, which was why we had, merged over into the left-hand lane. So that guy in the median must have just been a worker, but I had no idea what had happened to that man.
And during that impact and the rolling, was there ever a flash of your life that happened during that time, or?
No, no, that car started rolling, and I kid you not, I was like, man, we've been rolling a long time. We still rolling? Like, we've been rolling forever. But I wasn't, I didn't, that's the only thing I was thinking about was like, man, we've been rolling, we still rolling. We just rolling. That's the only thing I thought about. That was the only thing I was like, man, what's happening here?
And when they finally got you out of the car, did you ever see the condition of the car, of just how badly the car had been damaged?
When they got me out?
When they
No.
got you out?
Nope, because, what I found out, so, again, I had that feeling, that peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I was about to die. It was later confirmed that before they could save my limb, they had to save my life. I lost this obscene amount of blood, and it was just so traumatic, and so they had to stabilize me before they could think about what was going on with my limb. And so I did not know anything about the condition of the car. I didn't know anything about the person who hit me. All I knew was it was bad. And I didn't even know that I'm trying to think when I found out, because at first I thought I lost my foot.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in the trauma room, it's so bad that I'm laughing about this, but I can laugh about it now. But when I was in the trauma room, I'm laying down on the bed and I'm face down, and they're pulling at my leg, and I hear the doctor say to his colleague, "Did they look in the grass?
Oh,
Was there anything on the side of the road?" Like, and so I'm like, "Oh, they're looking for my foot." I'm like,
oh,
"Oh, they're looking for my foot," right? So, and I'm feeling this pulling, and but what he was doing, so they were looking for muscle and tendon,
oh.
and yeah, that they were looking for that. He wanted to know, was there any of that, that was captured, because the wound was so large. They were looking to salvage anything. And he was pulling because he was trying to he was trying to close the wound.
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to close the gap and not make it as big, the wound as gaping as it was. But yeah, at that time, I'm like, Lord, they looking for my foot.
So, but to be clear, you still had your foot. Your foot was still attached,
Right.
but everything above it sounds like it was mangled and torn open.
Right. But at that time, I did not know that. I thought that my foot was gone, and it wasn't until later that I figured out, that I was told what happened. But at that point, and for a while, I thought they were looking for my foot. That's
Right.
why I thought it was gone.
Oh man, I cannot imagine going through all of that and all of the uncertainty, and your aunt not really having a clear understanding of what's going on with her and what's going to happen with you and where you are. I mean, that is a lot to process.
Yeah, it was a lot going on. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot going on. It was like a 3-ring circus, I'm in one trauma room. My aunt is in another trauma room. I still, I know my daughter was with me on the
Mm-hmm.
flight, but she's not in the trauma room with me. So I don't know where she is, and so all of these things are going on, but it was a godsend, because because it allowed me not to focus on me. Right.
Right.
I'm focused on, oh, I wonder where my daughter is right now. How is she doing? Is she okay? I wonder how my aunt is doing. Did she continue to maintain consciousness? Did she fall back? Did she go back out of consciousness? It was just it gave me something else to focus on while they were trying to stabilize me and get me together.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to earlier that day, was there any sign? Did you have, you talked about your gut and possibly, thinking that you were going to die. Was there anything about that day that said, man, this trip is just not meant to be, or it's been too challenging, or something that would indicate that something could happen, something
Yeah.
unexpected and unplanned?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So there were several signs that this trip was a miss and should have been aborted. And we just kept going because I was determined to get to my destination. But looking back on it, yes, there were several signs. First, my aunt's brand new car broke down on the
Mhm.
way to North Carolina. Um, Two, we had to get a rental car, and they were supposed to give us, my aunt had an SUV at the time, and they were supposed to give us a comparable vehicle, but they didn't have any. And so they put us in this little beer can model of a car. And so it was just like a little teeny tiny thing of a car. But I'm like, we gotta keep going. We gotta get to this destination. My daughter had to use the bathroom right before the accident happened. She had to use the bathroom. And I'm like, just wait, Sophia, just wait a minute. We're almost there. Just hold on. We'll be there in a second. And if we would have, we would have stopped. If we would have stopped, that would not, we would not have been in that situation. There was, so those are three things off the jump
Mm-hmm.
that, made me, looking back on it, made me know that that trip was just not meant to be. But hindsight is 2020.
Right. Well, I guess on the flip side, though, do you feel like this happened for a reason? And you don't have to jump into that now. I think as you take us through this, your evolution and your healing, you can answer that later on down the road. But, you talked about the obstacles. You were able to overcome each one of those obstacles and land there at that time. And so,
Yeah.
I imagine through your healing, you were trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to, we were supposed to be there, but why?
Right. Right.
Where does this going through this drama and tragedy take us?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we'll talk about that as the story unfolds. But I didn't have the we were meant to be there mentality. I was quite the opposite. I was like resentful, as time went on. I was very, very resentful that we were there at that time. And had we paid attention to the signs, we would not have been there, and my life would not have been upended. And so, yeah, I did not have that. Oh yeah, we were supposed to be there. I didn't have that. I
Did
didn't
that
have
ever come through your healing process? Do you still feel to this day like we shouldn't have been there? Shouldn't have happened. Trip should have been aborted. We should have rescheduled.
I don't know. I have to think about that.
Okay. That's fair. That's
Yeah, I have
fair.
to think about that.
Okay, now going back to the signs and, this intuition and gut, and you don't have to answer this in this moment either, but do you now listen more than you did before?
Yes, I
Okay.
absolutely listen now. I listen more now than I did before. And in fact, I not only do I listen to my gut, but when other people like share things with me and
Ooh, you giving a side eye. This seems like there's something underlying there, but we'll
no,
leave that. We'll leave that.
no, I'm just saying, like, I'll just, when other, not only am I listening more, but I'm encouraging other people to listen more. Case in point, a friend of mine called once and she and her family were traveling to Michigan. It was really bad out. They were traveling from Ohio and she called and she's like, girl, like, we having car trouble. And she was trying to come see me. And she's like, girl, we having car trouble. I can't get to you. But I could do X, Y, and Z to make it happen so that I could get to you. And I'm like, oh no, girl, girl, that's a sign. I know what those signs mean. You need to like stop where you are. Do not collect. Don't go past go. Don't collect $200. You need to get a hotel, go on back home or whatever. And I will catch you another day. Right. So yeah, I'm definitely listening more in tuned to signs and heeding signs. And some people might say that that's increased discernment, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I can't even give it. I can't even give that credit to discernment. It really is because of the accident. That makes me just be like, okay, nope, it ain't meant to be. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. I mean, and the accident, it's now part of your story, right? And has impacted your
for good
life.
or
So
for
you
bad, it's
for
part of my
good or for
story.
bad. Right. That's right. And so,
Yeah,
from that, you got to do what you got to do. And
right.
if that means listening more to your intuition, then, that's what it's all about. That's what we're supposed to be doing anyway, which, we're so used to push, 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 push
Mm-hmm.
because there's a goal in mind instead of sometimes, like you said, is these things that happen that say abort, abort, abort. We like, nah, but we can
Right. Yeah.
push that to the side. It's all right.
Yeah. I mean, aborting, discontinuing, stopping, none of those words were in my vocabulary. So, I'm not surprised that I continue to push forward and to continue on that journey, but it's definitely not the case now. It's totally different.
So going back to the hospital, tell us more about how you started to learn was actually going on with you. When did they like start to break down your injuries and some of the things they needed to do in that short period of time to get you stable?
Oh, that's
Once
in the next episode.
oh, okay. Oh, sorry, y'all. Sorry.
That's in
Sorry.
episode 3. That's in episode 3.
Sorry.
You gotta come back. You gotta come back if you want that.
Stay tuned, y'all.
I
Make
can't
make
give it
sure
all
you
away.
subscribe.
Yeah, we can't. Right, we can't give it all away at the beginning. Yeah.
At what point did you decide, obviously you share with us that you put together a journal, but that you were going to turn this into a podcast?
So I just recently, actually, I was talking to my former boss. We were
Mm-hmm.
catching up. We hadn't seen each other or talked to each other in quite a while, since before the pandemic, actually. And we were just, catching up and talking about, our lives and where we were, where we are in the moment. And and in that conversation, she said, "Oh, you need to really share your story." And I said, "Yeah, I plan on it. I plan on sharing my story, but every time I try to talk about it, I start crying. And so I have to wait until I get to the point where I could tell the story without crying, and then I'll know when that is time." So after we got off the phone, I started thinking about it, and it had been it probably been a couple of years, no, at least a year since I opened up the journal. Cause I would periodically, I would open the journal, I would read it to just see where I was, bust into tears, right? 6 months later, read the journal, bust into tears. or get like really, really sad or whatever. And so I started reading the journal this time, and I was like, okay, I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling okay. And then it was so interesting because like my nose started burning. You know how you about to start crying, your nose start burning a little bit. So I felt it coming, but I would stop and I would take a deep breath. And I'm like, nope, you're okay. And I would keep reading. And and I read couple of chapters, and I was like, after I stopped reading, I was like, I think you're ready. I think it's time. And then I went to bed, and then I woke up at 2:38 in the morning with the idea that I needed to start a podcast, and that wasn't nothing but God. And God said to invite Lisa, and I
And here
texted
we
you
are.
at 2:38 in the morning, and here we are. Here we are. The rest is history, as they say.
Well, it's a powerful story. And I'm honored to help you tell the story. And I'm sure that a lot of people will be touched and helped through whatever journey they're going through, whatever obstacle they're kind of struggling with.
Yeah, I hope so. I do. I hope so. And I know that I'm not the only person who has gone through something. I know that there are other people out there who are facing situations and they feel like they just cannot do it anymore. They can't take one more step. And I know what that feels like. And I'm hoping that through retelling the story that I can provide hope and courage to another. And it's as simple as that.
Absolutely. And you know what? Because I know we're going to reach millions of people. I'm going to just put it out there. I'm going to claim it.
Yes.
Those people who came to your aid in that moment, they have come across this podcast. What do you want them to know?
Oh, boy. I want to tell them thank you. And to let them know that I'm okay. I'm thriving, and and that I'm okay, but that I'm sincerely and truly grateful for their aid.
Next time on Waiting is the Hardest.
In your recovery, you have to focus on, it's okay to mourn the loss of whatever it is that you have lost or are going through, but it's just as important to start to appreciate the other things that you bring to the table. Tell us what you thought of the episode. Follow us on Twitter at Waiting Hardest, or Instagram at Waiting is the Hardest, or Facebook Waiting is the Hardest. You can also email us at waitingisthehardest@gmail.com. Share this story of waiting and share your story of waiting. We want to hear from you. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and should not be substituted for those of a trained medical professional.